Welcome to the last video about the digestive system. So exciting. We're going to learn about how we get the goodness out of the food now. So this last video is all about getting the goodness out of the food. So we're going to start just past the stomach. So if you haven't learned about the stomach yet, stop now, go back, watch about the stomach, and then come back to here. So the first part where it goes after it's left the stomach is it ends up in something called your small intestine. Now, this is where the magic happens. So your small intestine is really, really long. Now, I've got it written down. I'm just going to tell you how long that small intestine is. 6 meters, okay? So in humans, this is about 6 meters long. Have a look at where you're sitting right now. 6 meters might be double the length of your bedroom. Okay, so if you were to lay out your small intestine from one side of your bedroom to the other and then bring it back again, that's about 6 meters. So it's really, really long. Now, why do we want it really long? We want to do that to increase our surface area. There's a lot of chat about this here. We want to make sure we got lots and lots of surfaces to absorb as much of the nutrients as we possibly can out of our food. Now, I want you to think about the fact that when the food left our stomach, it was really, really acidic. Then it was called this substance called chyme. Yeah. Now, chyme is bad. You don't want acidic substances in your lovely small intestine where you are doing all of your absorption of food. So there are 2 things that come in here. I'm going to talk to you about them after I've talked about the function of the small intestine. But this is the introduction of something called bile. And we also get the introduction of pancreatic juices, which are, funnily enough, a whole bunch of enzymes too. So they come in first, and their really, really important job is to get rid of this chyme. They want to neutralize it. We don't want any acid in our small intestine. It won't work. And that's because our small intestine, if you zoom right in on its walls, it looks a bit something like this. It's kind of covered in these things called villi. So these are the villi. This is if you zoomed right in. So here's the wall. Just let me get another color to show you. So here's the wall, yeah, of the inside. This is our small intestine all through here. So this is a wall. Can you see how, and I'm just going to have to remove those pen markings. Can you see how it's just a little bit bumpy? Yeah, on this picture you can see it's a little bit bumpy. If you were to zoom in on that, this is what it would look like. So this is a zoomed in wall of your small intestine. Yeah, and it's covered in these little bumps called villi. If you really want to look it up, look up microvilli. So on the surface of all of these, you also have microvilli. And the whole point of this is that each one of these villi are only about 1 millimeter long. So that's like, you know, tiny, tiny. Yeah. But there are about 5 million of them. And every single one of them is chock full of capillaries. And that's because this is where the nutrients are going to move out of your small intestine and into your bloodstream. Why do we want them in our bloodstream? So they can go to your cells. Why do we want it in our cells? To do that magical cellular respiration. So when we have a look here, this one here is our small intestine. Now, the most important thing that's happening here is nutrient absorption. You can also mention that they are covered in villi, which give you a large surface area. Yeah, so there's a nice little summary of what's happening there. Now, I talked about 2 substances. I talked about this substance called bile, and I talked about this substance called pancreatic juices. So we're going to go back and we're going to look at this organ here. This is the liver. So the liver is this organ here. And there's another organ that's not labeled, and this is this one here. This is your pancreas. So I'm going to talk about these two organs and why they're so important. So they're not part of the main canal, but they do form a really important job in your digestive system. So once you've absorbed a lot of these nutrients in your small intestine, your liver, which is a large, large organ that sits all the way across here, yeah, one of the largest organs in your body, and I might try and find you a digital dissection so that you can have a look at how big it is. What it does is it food processes things, has more than 200 different functions. It stores some nutrients, changes them from one form to another, depending on what you need in your body. But in addition to this, it also produces that substance called bile. So bile, you may have accidentally vomited bile before when it's actually come up all the way through your stomach. So it's gone from your small intestine to your stomach, to your esophagus and out your mouth. And that's because you have nothing left in your stomach. And so it's draining as much of the fluid out of your body as possible. Now, bile is produced in the liver and it's stored in this tiny little organ hidden underneath your liver called the gallbladder. You may have heard of people that have gallstones, yeah? And that's one of the things I'm going to get you to look at if you choose to. So it's going to be secreted, and the whole job of this is to neutralize the acid in your stomach. We don't want that acid to come out and destroy parts of our body. So here is the liver. Over here, we labeled it before. Here is the pancreas. We're going to come and have a look at that in a second. Now, the other one that's in here is there's probably, if you want to, you can add in this organ called a gallbladder. All right, where's my pancreas going? Here we go. So the pancreas is another organ that's sitting right next to the duodenum, which is a fancy word for the top part of your small intestine. Now, if we hadn't finished breaking down the food, this is the guy that's going to do it for you. So a pancreas is going to produce all of these enzymes, more and more of enzymes. They're going to break down fats. They're going to break down proteins. They're going to break down carbohydrates. Your pancreas is also really, really important. This isn't mostly to do with your digestion. It kind of is. It produces insulin. So if you want to go and have a look at people that are diabetic as to what insulin does. So insulin is really helpful for storing any of the excess sugar that might be floating around in your bloodstream. So your pancreas, which you're like, what the hell's a pancreas? Why do I care? Is actually vitally important. If your pancreas stops working, you can't digest food, which means that you can't make energy and you're probably going to feel really, really tired and crappy. If you don't have a functioning pancreas, you can't store the sugar in your body. So that means that you'd have to constantly eat, which I know doesn't upset you very much, but you'd have to constantly eat something all the time just to get that to work. So it's a really, really important organ within your body. The last organ that we're going to talk about though, so we've gone all the way through our small intestine and we're going to end up in this guy here. Yeah, so this part here is my large intestine. Now, the main function of my large intestine is all about, there is also this thing called the appendix attached to the beginning of the large intestine. It doesn't do anything anymore. It used to, we think, maybe have some role in helping us digest foods, but it's very controversial as to what the actual function of the appendix was. And so now, because it doesn't form any function, we call it a vestigial organ. But this bit here, going around on the outside, that's your large intestine. Now, the whole point of your large intestine, it's responsible for absorbing water. Now, when you digest food, your food will have water in it. Now, we live on land, and the whole thing about living on land is that it's dry, and our body needs a lot of water. So if we were just to poo out all of our water all the time, we would get dehydrated very, very fast. Think about if you may have ever had, or just if you've ever known someone that's had diarrhea. Yeah, diarrhea makes you very sick, and that's because your large intestine is not absorbing the water like it should do. So this is the last stage of digestion, where we've taken all the goodness out of our food. Now we're just going to take back the water. Once we've got the water, all that's left is the waste. Yeah, and so what happens is it leads to the final part of our digestive system called the rectum, and then the anus, and then we get poo. All of the poo. And that is the end of your digestive system. So let's just double check. What are all our organs called? So we have our mouth here. You could say these are also the salivary glands. We should have our teeth. We should have our tongue labelled. We should have our esophagus labelled. We should have our liver labelled. If you want to, you can also add in your gallbladder. We should have our stomach labelled. We should have, where's this one? This one's our small intestine labelled. We should have, sorry girls, we should have our pancreas labelled. That's not spelt correctly. Get rid of that bit. Our pancreas. We should also have our large intestine. We should have our appendix. So that's the one that's hidden down here. If anyone's had their appendix out, that's where it was. And then finally, we get our rectum and the anus down here. So that should be your fully labelled diagram. And if you have any questions, come onto Zoom and let's have a chat. Bye.